Welcome, everyone. This is Sara Jamshidi. Very welcome to our first episode, Peacemindedly. It's the show that we feature peaceful bridge makers, those people who are dedicating their lives perhaps to connecting souls, ideas, thoughts, cultures, nations. And I am so grateful for the guest that I have with me today. She is my dear guest, Lauren Marshall. Hi, Lauren. So,
Hi.
hello. So, we are going to talk with Lauren about so many interesting things, and we are going to have an amazing discussion. Before I dive into the discussion, I'm just going to have a few very quick announcement for the show. During the show, I have my assistant producer, Amy. Amy's here to take your phone call. Not phone calls. I'm sorry. I'm just still in the Wisconsin Public Radio. So here to take the comments and questions via Facebook, and you can ask your comments and questions. When you do that, the only request I have is to be mindful about the comments that you are making on the Facebook. We want to be kind, compassionate, and peaceful towards each other. So, just to be kind and phrase your questions in a way that it's pretty standard and straightforward for us to go through. No jargon and no terminologies and so forth. Thank you. Amy is going to stand by to take your questions. And then this is an amazing discussion. I'm hoping that's going to be amazing discussion. Lauren is my first guest. We are going to have basically on and for the next 10 weeks, on every Tuesday and Thursday at 2:30 p.m. we are going to discuss the matters of peace and kindness and compassion with many amazing people. Lauren is one of those amazing people. So Lauren is the author of many plays and musicals, including Waiter. There is a slug in my latte. I assume that this is an interesting, funny musical, and the 100th Eye, and also an award-winning contemporary adaptation of Misanthrope. I mean, I may mispronounce some of those, Lauren, and I apologize if I do that.
That's okay.
And also the Fixing Einstein. Her latest work is Abraham's Land. We are going to talk about Abraham's Land and its production and basically how took place. Lauren holds a BA and JD from Stanford. She also holds the MFA in music theater writing from New York University. She held position as the producing artistic director of Seattle Public Theater, and now she's a founding director of Theater of Possibilities, serving youth with autism. And the way she's saying this disability, I really love, because she puts the disability into parentheses and then says ability. I'm sure that you have lots of comments about that. But today we are going to talk specifically about Abraham's Land, a play that I've seen a few months ago, and I just enamored and truly liked the play, and I invited Lauren to talk with us about the play. Before diving into the Q&A and the conversation, I asked in our pre-interview and in our preparation, I asked Lauren if she can tell us what peace means to her. Okay, Lauren, it's now back to you.
Sure. Well, Abraham's Land is a play that has to do with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I'm Jewish American. And but before I dive into that, I think Sarah wanted me to talk about peace in a very personal way. And so I've had kind of an epiphany in my own life about that. In that when I was younger, I always thought of peace as this perfect harmonious state, and I love nature, and I would always my ideal state was a beautiful lake by a mountain, and everything was the sunshine was warm and there were no mosquitoes and everything was really perfect. And one day, it was Christmas Day, there was a big snowstorm in Seattle, and my husband and I went on a walk in Discovery Park. And it was one of those beautiful days that really could have been a picture on a calendar. And there was an old church, and there was a hillside, and children were sledding down the hill. And it was so harmonious, except that my boots were wet, and because we'd been walking in the snow, they were soaked through. My pant legs were wet. I was hungry. My husband and I were not quite in the same mood. I wanted to stay out and hike some more. He wanted to go home and have lunch. And I realized that peace inevitably encompasses tension. And that here I was in this postcard picture, and I was at peace, but there were tensions too. And when I extrapolate from that to larger conflicts and situations, I realized that peaceful coexistence is a precarious balance, and it has to accommodate imperfection. It has to accommodate disagreement, conflict. But the difference between peace and war is really the magnitude of suffering. And I think a lot of times with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Israel's saying, well, we'll have peace when there's security. And they're sort of waiting until there is no tension, or there's this concern of, well, if we do make peace with our Palestinian neighbors, will we be able to get along? Well, maybe it won't always be easy, but it's got to be better than the alternative of homes being bulldozed and people being locked up and tortured and soldiers gunning down children. And so to me, peace, it encompasses discomfort, but there's beauty within that balance.
Perfect. And then beauty within that balance perhaps made you think about how you can put those beauty and balance on words, wasn't it?
Yes.
So tell us.
In the play,
the
way the play opens, it opens with three prayers. There's a Jewish blessing, the Sabbath blessing, a Christian prayer, which is the Lord's Prayer, actually sung in Aramaic, and then the Muslim call to prayer in Arabic. And the three prayers are interwoven in the way I described it in the script is I said a beautiful cacophony of sound. So there is harmony in how those prayers are interwoven, but there's some dissonance too. And the actors are coming onto stage, they're all holding candles and they're interweaving among one another. And so that is the vision of what could be a peaceful coexistence that isn't without tension, but it's still beautiful.
Where is tension in the play? Where is tension?
Would you like me to tell you
yes,
a synopsis of the plot? Okay. Yeah. So the story of the play is it's set during the first Intifada, so approximately 1990, and an Israeli soldier, Yitzhak, shoots a young Palestinian named Ismail at a demonstration in Jerusalem because he perceives that Ismail is threatening him. And afterwards, he realizes that Ismail was unarmed and he feels remorse. And he goes on it, and he's haunted by Ismail's ghost. And he ends up going on a journey to Ismail's home in a refugee camp in Gaza to return his identity card and ask forgiveness of Ismail's family. And through that course of the journey, he sees the good of the other side. He also sees some of the evil that is done by his own side. He ends up for a time even spending time as a Palestinian in an Israeli prison. And ultimately, he's forced to choose between his duty as a soldier and his desire to follow his conscience and do the right thing. And I'm not sure if I should tell you what his choice is.
No. We do not need to spoil the play or the story. But I remember when we were discussing about the play, even first of all, there is, the story itself and the plot is very, I would say, serious and interesting, that brings lots of serious and interesting discussions. And then I remember that you were just perhaps thinking about having a discussion group or some form of dialogue after the play. Is this something that you are envisioning for the upcoming play?
Absolutely. And I should say that the play has a long history. I originally developed it as a Jewish-Arab collaboration with Hana Eady, who is a Palestinian director living in the Seattle area, and with a composer named David Nafisian, who is both Jewish and Muslim Iranian in his ancestry. And I'm American Jewish. So it was a Jewish collaboration from the very beginning. We did research in the Middle East and had kind of groups, kind of advisory groups that included many Jews and Arabs, including the late poet Hussein Barghouti from the West Bank, and some really amazing people that were part of our original concept group for the play. And actually, that story of the soldier came out of stories that we shared in that original group. And then the play was further developed with Israeli and Palestinian teenagers at Seeds of Peace camp in Maine. So it has been performed twice, once in 1992, the original version in Seattle, and then in 1999 by the teenagers at Seeds of Peace. This is a brand new version of the play. I felt that it was time to bring it back because of things that were going on, just starting around 2014 when the occupation became increasingly brutal with the bombardment of Gaza and the things that we've seen in the news since. I just felt really compelled as a Jewish American that I needed to speak out critically about the occupation.
One thing before we go too much forward. So you said that when you were, I mean, in the camp, the Seeds of Peace, and then the original thought about the play came about. Can you tell me a bit more about what happened, what intrigued you, inspired you, that you thought this is something you would like to encounter?
Sure, absolutely. And that was a long way of answering your question, which is yes, we will have discussion groups but from the very beginning, back in 1992, we set up that model. So every performance will be followed by audience discussion. Ideally, I would like to do it the way we did it then, which is have both a Jewish and an Arab facilitator. So have co-facilitators for the discussions, and we will be asking for community leaders, people from the mosques and the synagogues and the churches and cultural communities to help us lead those. So the original concept, it's very old. I might be revealing my age, but 1991 during the first Gulf War. And there were images on TV of Jordanians protesting against Israel. And, you know, some of it was against Israel, but they were also saying things like death to the Jews. And I watched that and I wondered what's going on. And I was like, who are these people? Why do they hate me? I need to understand this. And being young and idealistic, I said, I need to find somebody who's Arab and write a play. Let's write a play together. And I found Hana Eady. He was a graduate directing student at the UW at that time. He had just directed Seeing Double, which is by San Francisco Mind Group, very funny play, also about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So I found him backstage and I said, I want to write a play with you. And he said, okay. And he likes to say that I don't remember it this way, but in deference to Han, I will tell the story, is he claims that I said, I want to write a play with a Muslim. And he said, well, I'm Palestinian, but I'm not Muslim, I'm Christian. Now, I don't remember saying that because I don't think I was that naive, but that's what he says. Anyway, so we created the play. I did do research over there. I went on a compassionate listening group, and actually it was very intense, where I spent the night in 2 different refugee camps with families, talked to people on all sides, visited Jewish settlements, visited homes. Really, really powerful. And it was during the first Intifada too.
How come? Why it was powerful to you?
Well, I saw how people's lives were affected. And, I remember there was a young man, this was in, gosh, I hope I'm not mixing up my names. It was a refugee Jalazun in the West Bank, Jalazun. We went to Jabalia also in Gaza, but this is Jalazun. And this young man led us through the camp, and he showed us the rubble where the homes were destroyed. And we learned about, we talked to the families where everybody had a brother who was in jail, or, somebody who had been shot in the foot, or somebody who had been shot in the head and was, forever brain damaged. I mean, it was just really tragic. But what really struck me about this young man as he toured us through the camp was he had this big smile on his face, and he was funny, and he would crack jokes. And eventually we got back to their little community center, and we all sat down, and he said, okay, enough talking about the conflict. Let's talk about something else. And so he told us all about, arranged marriages and how they kind of arranged the marriages over the coffee. And that ultimately became a song in the play. It was very fun. But I was so struck by his ability to have optimism and levity in the face of the conflict. And he became the model for the character of Ismail in the play.
Mm-hmm. So you say that you were in a coffee. I mean, how the arranged marriage basically came out during the coffee drinking, and then you just took that part, perhaps a part in your play. And I'm now thinking that should we, as just people, be too cautious around writers because they just may mold us and reshape us within their image, in their image, to create a character.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. They say what great artists steal. I don't know if I'm a great artist, but yes, we do. Anything you say could be used in a play.
Yeah. So I wonder, who did you take your Ishmael from, and Yitzhak?
Well, so Ismail was inspired by this young man. It tells us. Yitzhak was harder because I didn't have a single person for him. I see him as he's kind of a classic good Jewish boy, what we call a mensch, right? He wants to do the right thing. A mensch, a good man.
Mensch.
It's
Tell
Yiddish
me more.
term.
Yeah,
It's Yiddish term. It means a good man. All right. So I guess if there was a model for him, maybe it would be my first cousin, who I think is just a really nice young man, but he's not Israeli. He's American. But Yitzhak, he's been, his mother is a Holocaust survivor. His father's from Syria, so he is part Ashkenazi and part what we call Mizrahi Jew, right, an Arab Jew. So he grew up speaking both Hebrew and Arabic. He wants to do the right thing. He has a song early in the play where he says Israel is the most moral army in the world, and he actually chides one of the other soldiers for not being respectful towards the Palestinians at a checkpoint. And he says, we can do better than that. And so I think his beliefs were very emblematic of a lot of the soldiers that I talked to when I was in Israel in 1991, where there was, at that time anyway, there was kind of a belief that, well, we have to do this occupation, but we're going to try to be as moral as we can about it, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's where he starts. But then he sees his own, when he faces the reality of what he's just done, when he's shot somebody, he knows deep down in his heart that shooting was not justified. I mean, the other soldiers say, yeah, he was threatening you, you were justified, but he knows that he shot impulsively out of anger because his own brother had died in Lebanon. And when he saw this young Arab man raising a kufiyah and leading the crowd on, the first thing he thought of was his brother being killed. And he felt that pulse, that just rush of anger, and he pulled the trigger. And so as with Ismail's ghost kind of prodding him, kind of acting as a voice of conscience, he really goes on this journey of conscience, and he examines his soul, and he realizes that his actions were unjustified, which is why he wants to make amends. The play actually takes place in the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So those are the Jewish, we call them the High Holy Days, but it's the 10 days of atonement where you atone for your wrongs. And so he meets Ismail's, he initially goes to Gaza disguised as a Palestinian, and he meets Ismail's sister, Amira, and he feels a lot of compassion for her suffering and feels a bond with her. And he ends up getting when soldiers come to arrest Amira because she's a school teacher and she's teaching in violation of the prohibitions that require the schools to be closed, Yitzhak takes the blame. He says he's the teacher and he gets arrested in her place. So that's how he ends up experiencing what it's like to be a Palestinian prisoner. And it's only when he's been released from prison, when he finally tells his captors who he really is, they send him back to Gaza, because at that point, Ismail's cousin Fatih is so angered by the unjust shooting of Ismail, and that the authorities haven't even returned his body. They can't get any information. He ends up organizing a retaliatory act, and there's a young woman who does a suicide bombing. And so when Yitzhak is released from prison, he's sent back to Gaza to try to find the identity of the bomber. And he's sort of forced to spy on Amira. And that's where he has to make that choice between his loyalty. And he goes full. I don't want to say exactly what the ending is, but I will say that in his journey, he goes from believing that the occupation can be moral to realizing that there is no such thing as a moral occupation, that the occupation is immoral, and that ultimately he refuses to serve. I will say that. So the model for him is really a lot of the stories that come out of Breaking the Silence. Those are from Israeli soldiers who have been in the IDF and have seen what's going on and have refused to serve. So I read a lot of their stories. So those are really the model for Yitzhak. And I will say we're in the process of casting right now, and so I can't announce names or anything yet, but it's very, very likely that we will have an Israeli actor, an amazing performer who has served in the IDF, and a Palestinian actor
Wow.
in the play. And I'm very excited about that.
Yes. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So real backgrounds.
Yes. Not necessarily as those two characters. I mean, I'm not at liberty to say yet because we're still casting, but they will very likely be in the play.
So you mentioned Holocaust, and then you mentioned how we can ever justify occupation back in Palestine. I've seen the movie. I've seen the play, a reading of the play, and I know that, at least in my opinion, when I was watching, I was thinking the play is unorthodoxically, if it's the right word to use, so pro-Palestine. And then I was thinking exactly that, I was just putting myself, perhaps for the sake of comparison, putting myself in the shoes of someone who has experienced Holocaust, and today is the Holocaust Remembrance Day, and thinking, so how they would think or react over the play. So I'm just curious to know what have been the response from people who are so perhaps take Israel very close to their hearts.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, it varies quite a lot. My parents' generation, my family was lucky that my grandparents left Europe before the Holocaust, and so my parents, my grandparents were the immigrants, and so my parents grew up here, and came of age during the Holocaust, and they had a very hard time with the play. They're no longer alive, but when I came back from the Middle East, and I wrote an article that was published in a lot of newspapers, and my parents, they had a hard time with it. At first, they said, "You've been brainwashed," and my aunt, she read a draft of the play not that many years ago, and she said, "You just don't understand. You don't understand why we have to have a Jewish state. If you'd grown up during the Holocaust, you would understand." But I look at it differently, and I think a lot of progressive Jews, and especially people of my generation and younger, are starting to look at it differently. And what the lesson I draw from the Holocaust is never again, meaning not only never again can we let this happen to us, but never again can this happen to anybody. And that we have a moral duty to really prevent injustice in the world. And so, you know, to draw a comparison is very touchy, and you know, there are lines in the play where Ismail accuses Yitzhak, and he says, you know, look around you, look what you've created, you know, a camp surrounded by barbed wire and watchtowers. And he basically says that this is the Holocaust, that you are doing this to us. And some of the stories that have come out of Gaza lately, you know, really start to smack of genocide when you're talking about, you know, some of what the soldiers who have in Breaking the Silence, they talk about how people have really just shot indiscriminately without cause at innocent people. So it starts to get very, very disturbing. And, you know, you can quibble and say, oh, well, that's not the same as extermination camps, but it's getting far, far too close. So as a Jewish person, you know, one of our core values is this notion of tikkun olam, is that we have a duty to repair the world. And so, you know, I'm not the most observant person in the world in terms of, you know, going to synagogue or that kind of thing. We do celebrate the holidays at home, but I am very observant when it comes to Jewish values. And I feel like if there's one thing I can do to help make a better world, it is to speak out against injustice, and not just injustice towards Jews, but injustice by Jews towards other people. So my own views on Zionism have changed quite a lot over the course of the play, of my, you know, 3 decades working on this play. I think early on, I still felt that there was a need for a Jewish homeland. It was certainly a natural response to the Holocaust, so I understand historically where that came from. And I'm probably, I think I favored, you know, a 2-state solution. So there would be a Jewish homeland and a Palestinian homeland. And I'm not adverse to that. If they can work that out, you know, more power to them. It would be great. But the reality is such that with the settlements and the water issues, that it's looking very less and less likely that will ever happen. And I guess I would say it's probably, where I've come to is realizing that's kind of a false dream, and maybe not just from a practicality standpoint, but more from a principle standpoint, that I've started to question the whole premise of Zionism, that I think that Zionism was an outgrowth of European nationalism, right? That each ethnic group should have its own nation. And so if the Germans can have their Aryan nation, well, then we Jews should have our Jewish nation. So it's really a perpetuation of the very ideology that allowed the Holocaust to happen. Mm-hmm. And I see that ideology as pernicious. And I see that American values, which right now are under threat, but American values at their ideal of multiculturalism, of pluralism, really, to me, are much, much better values. And people say, well, don't you believe in this, you know, the Israel's right to exist? Well, absolutely, I believe in Israel's right to exist. But that doesn't mean that Israel needs to exist as a Jewish state. It can exist as a state for Jews and Muslims and Christians. And with it won't be easy, but that's where we get to that, you know, that peace isn't easy, right? There's still going to be your boots soaked through with water, you know, and you're still going to be a little hungry, and there's still going to be some conflict with your husband. Peace has discord, but you could, if there was the will to make peace, it would be possible to create some sort of one-state solution, whether that's a federation with Palestinian sections and Jewish and Israeli sections, or I don't know. I leave that to the political leaders. But I think if the will is there, you could create a possibility for all peoples to coexist in that land. And I think that's the only solution. Not just not because I care about injustice to the Palestinians, but also Jewish self-preservation. I mean, I just think it's in our interest too to promulgate those values of inclusion and multiculturalism, because we're a very small minority on this planet. If, you know, we don't support that, we're not going to last.
You just mentioned a phrase that I read in the op-ed you submitted to Seattle Times. Tell me, it's the Hebrew. Tell me the phrase. You need to heal the
Oh,
that
tikkun olam, to
yeah,
heal
yeah.
the world.
Yes. Can you tell me more about the what does it mean to you?
Well, I guess there, like Islam has its 5 pillars. So I don't know if this is exactly comparable, but there are this kind of 3 principles in Judaism of mitzvah, which is good deeds, tzedakah, which is charity, and then tikkun olam, which is to repair the world, so that it, that every person has that imperative to do what they can in some way to contribute to making a better world. And so this is how one of the ways that I've chosen, for my life's journey to try and make that contribution.
Absolutely, so beautiful. Right now at this hour, we are talking with. Sorry, I just got off. Sorry. I'm exploring this live studio, but we are talking with Lauren Marshall. She is Jewish American playwright. She has her new play coming out, Abraham's Land. It's going to be up on. I do have all the details here. Just bear with me. On Broadway. It's going to be on Broadway in Seattle between September 17 to 27. Hopefully, things goes back to normal, and we can see the play. She is in the process of casting and getting the all of the details together. And then there are lots of ways that you can find about Lauren. She has a website that I'm going to mention because it's a brand new website. We're going to put the website out in our website, goldtune.com, and then you can find information about it. I think it's Abraham's Land Musical is the website. And also on our website, you can find how you can help and help the cause. I think it's a very privileged and important cause. So for the information, the information that I would like you to know is the a program that I'm putting together is Peacemindedly, basically featuring peaceful bridge makers. And I'm talking with people who are making differences within their lives and the life of their communities within a peaceful and compassionate and kind premises and platform. And you can just find about the websites. I mean, the program that we are putting together. My next guest is going to be on Thursday, 2:30, the same time. Steve Slocum, a peace activist and also author of a very interesting book called Why Do They Hate Us? We're going to dive into a conversation with Steve. And here we are talking with Lauren Marshall, playwright and writer for this amazing play. So, Lauren, what do you want us to know about the play? I mean, if someone wants to find about the play, find you, tell us how they can find about the play.
Oh, absolutely. And we were joking that it's going to be on Broadway, but I should clarify that what we mean is Broadway Performance Hall in Seattle, which is on Broadway Street, but not quite yet Broadway in New York. Maybe someday, inshallah.
Inshallah.
But yes. And again, inshallah, if all goes well and we're allowed to reopen the theaters, the production will be September 17th through the 27th at the Broadway Performance Hall, which is on Capitol Hill in Seattle. And you can go to our website, which is abrahamslandmusical.com for more information about the project. There's a link there where you can sign up to get on the emailing list to buy tickets and get more information about the production. Also, if you're interested in helping out with the project in any way, we need all sorts of support, everything from finding housing for donated housing and miles for our out-of-town artists who are coming in. As I mentioned, we'll have an Israeli and a Palestinian actor coming in from out of town, ushering, helping. We need help with fundraising for the play, and there's a link to make a tax-deductible donation. So all sorts of ways that you can get involved. If you're interested in outreach or post-play discussions, please do contact us. And again, you can go to the website to find our email, or you can write to info@abrahamslandmusical.com to reach me or my production associate, Colin Hovde.
Excellent. Amazing. For the second part of our discussion, we chose to play. I have it on my iPhone, so I'm just going to play out of my iPhone, and then we go into a discussion. But it's from the Garden of Infinite Path. And can you tell us about what's happening in this conversation?
Yes. So this is an excerpt from. I'll say this is a demo recording. It doesn't have full orchestration. It's just the singers and piano. But it's from the play. So Yitzhak, the soldier, he has shot Ismail, and he has realized that Ismail was unarmed and that the shooting was a really bad mistake. He feels guilty. He disguises himself as a Palestinian and travels. He has Ismail's identity card. And so he travels to Ismail's home in a refugee camp, Deir al-Bala camp in Gaza, to return the identity card and just to kind of find out who was this guy. He's not even yet planning to ask for forgiveness. He's just trying to figure out, was he a good guy or a bad guy? He's curious. And he ends up walking into a schoolhouse where he meets Ismail's sister, Amira, and she's a teacher. And she has just learned the day before that her brother was killed. She's still kind of reeling from the grief. And she sees this person as, she believes he's a friend, a Palestinian who was a friend of Ismail's, who's brought her the card. She doesn't know that he's really the soldier. And in the course of this song, which is a duet, they're both really searching for meaning in the aftermath of his death.
Excellent. Let us listen to I'm playing out of my iPad. If we were in a real studio, I have my sound engineer and I have some, but here we are just playing out of what we
This is just a little cut from the middle.
Yes.
Of the
song. My heart now has a gaping hole. I fight to control my wrath. I fear we'll choose an angry path. I fear a deadly aftermath. We're in a struggle, then what should be my part? I try to teach my students that violence and vengeance have no place anywhere in our belief. But what to do with all this grief? I'm in a struggle, it's tearing me apart. I've lost my way, I'm trying hard to not lose heart. To not lose heart. So here's the question I'm asking. In a garden of infinite paths, which path do I choose when one path leads to war and one path leads to peace? But either way we lose. That's the same question I'm asking. Tell me.
Beautiful.
Perfect.
Beautiful. The same question. Yes.
Yes. And then Yitzhak sort of sings from his perspective too, what he's experiencing as a soldier, except she doesn't really know that he's a soldier. The music for that is by Roger Ames, who is the new composer on the project. So when I dusted it off the shelf a couple of years ago, the original composer, David Benefician, was no longer available, but had given us permission to keep his music, but to add to it and change it. And so Roger came on. The new score now is about 90% brand new. It still has some of the original music, and 90% of it is Roger's, and it's just absolutely gorgeous score, as you can hear. And the performers are Andy Al-Hadaf and Christian Birdsong, and Chris DiStefano is playing.
Has he written the song himself, or Roger?
I wrote the lyrics and Roger wrote the music.
Excellent.
That's how we work.
Excellent. Awesome. So I can't help to ask basically this question. I'm from Iran, and then this issue of Palestine and Israel, it's usually a very hot topic. So there is a old saying in my culture. So if I translate it in English, it says it's from Saadi. Saadi is I think Saadi is a very famous poet back in probably seven. No, I think it's 12th century. And then the line goes as they killed a locksmith in Samarkand. And they just explains in the poems that who are they and what happening with a locksmith in Samarkand, and a carpenter was beheaded in Bach. So, and then usually the analogy goes into in Iran and Iranian interpretation that okay, so many Jews have got killed in Holocaust, and I mean atrocious, extremely, I mean unthinkable happened to this population, and later a different nation other than the nation that has imposed the violence against the Jews are paying sort of the cost,
Right.
or paying the price. And then I can't help to think about this this analysis, and I wanted to see how you interpret or whether or not this is something that I mean right to address.
Yes, I almost wonder if I should read a passage from the play that addresses that. Would you like me to?
Yes.
This is not the eulogy, which I know I want to read for you also, but I think this goes so much to the point, because this is an argument between Yitzhak and Ismail. Would it be okay if I read a little
Absolutely,
bit?
I love that. Yes, please,
Okay,
please
and
go ahead.
let me preface that I'm not an actor; I'm a playwright. So,
Yes.
So this is the penultimate scene in the play where Yitzhak, he's been through his whole journey. He's been in a prison. He's come back. He's confessed to Amira that he is the soldier who shot her brother. He's asked Amira's father for forgiveness, and basically the father says, "Well, yeah, I can forgive you, but I can't stop the angry young men like Fatih, the cousins. I have no control, and you're going to have to deal with them." And so Yitzhak is running from the angry mob, and he encounters Ismail, who's a ghost but kind of acts like a real person, one last time, and they have this confrontation. And Ismail asks Yitzhak, he says, "Why did you shoot me?" And this is Yitzhak's response. He says, "I was afraid. I thought you were threatening me. When one of your people raises a stone, I don't just see a stone. I see a sea of hostile faces that spreads from here to Baghdad to Tripoli. I see the whole history of our people. I see 5 wars. I see my brother David being killed by one of you. I see the Holocaust." Ismail responds, "Every Israeli, same story. I'm tired of hearing about your suffering and your pain. Enough already. I didn't send your people to a concentration camp." Yitzhak, "I never said you did." Ismail, "But you punish me for it. Look around you. What do you see? A camp surrounded by watchtowers and barbed wire. Do you see the rubble? That's from our homes you demolish. Do you smell the sewage? That's from our taxes, which go to pay for your military police. And if we violate your rules that you make because we have no citizenship, no right to vote, you shoot us in the head. And you want me to feel sorry for you? I don't care about your Holocaust." At that point, Yitzhak
Amazing.
strikes
Yes.
Ismail. They actually have a physical struggle. Ismail realizes that Yitzhak has been wounded because of his experience having suffered torture in prison. And anyway, they come to an understanding.
So basically we know. Basically, we know that this unjust has happened, but perhaps it's just for being politically correct, or for whatever reason we have to Yeah, turn heads, maybe. I don't know.
Well, I think Yitzhak says, after the two men reconcile, he realizes, the abused becomes the abuser. That, and I think that's how you really have to look at it. That the Jews collectively have been abused, and so they are really, to a large extent, they are acting out of fear, and that's where that comes from. That doesn't excuse it, and you have to be really careful. There's an earlier song in the play where, right after Yitzhak realizes that Ishmael was unarmed, and it's called The Victim, and he sort of asks, why do I feel like the victim when I'm the one who's in control here? And it's really about how each side does feel like the victim. But I think you can understand it from that standpoint, but that doesn't justify it. That's where it's time for people to stand up and say, okay, enough already. Let's stop these cycles of abuse. And your security doesn't come from shutting out other people, right? Your security comes from embracing them, from living together, from forgiveness, because Israel is not secure now. I mean, they have to build walls and rockets come over the walls. You can never create security that way. I think someone once said, it was either a fortress or a tomb, right? That those were one of the leaders of Israel once said that. Well, those are not acceptable solutions. Who wants to live in a fortress, right?
Exactly.
And obviously no one wants a tomb. So there is, you got to break down the walls and build a garden, I say. That's the only answer.
Absolutely. And honestly, I mean, one of the things I always in my thinking I go through is how difficult it was for Jewish people to just, I can experience. I mean, right now I've just said to a few of my friends that I believe no one better than Jewish people understand what Muslims are going through in terms of bigotry and harassment in this country, because they've been through and they do have a feel for us. So in that regard, I don't know, probably the most sympathetic community towards Muslim cause.
Yeah, I mean, after the shootings in Christchurch, right? There was this incredible rallying of support, and I went to the service that they had at a mosque, and there were Jewish, I think there were Jewish people, leaders there, and Muslim and Christian. It was really beautiful, and I think we're seeing the rise of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism at the same time. I think in America there's a lot of solidarity. We have groups like Shalom Salam, but then you get over there. I mean, I think that's why what I'm hoping to do with the play. Why I think it's important for Americans.
This was my next question.
Out. Yeah,
good.
Is I feel like if American Jews speak out, we can start to change the dialogue. I think America does have a huge influence on Israel. We are in a power. We have the opportunity to make a difference, and that if we can change the dialogue here in America, so that criticism of Israel is not equated with anti-Semitism. They're not the same thing, and that's just a cheap shot that a lot of people use, right? That my criticism of Israel is coming from a place of Jewish love, and love for all humanity. But I think if it becomes safer for American Jews to speak out, it will then become safer for non-Jews to speak out, because then they won't be accused of anti-Semitism. So I think we kind of have to be leaders in changing the dialogue around Israel. I mean, nobody had qualms about speaking out about apartheid in South Africa. We need to take a similar stance on Israel, and it can come from love. I mean, I have friends who are Israelis, and I want to see an end to suffering. I have a friend who made Aliyah, and her son is 14 years old, and he's going to have to join the army one of these days. And I don't want to see these young people grow up and have to do that.
Absolutely. And you just answered the question that I intend to ask, which was, so why it's important for a Jewish person to stand up against this kind of injustice. And you just mentioned that at least less accusation of being anti-Semitism. And then, beautiful. I truly love the answer. Yeah,
I mean,
go
we
ahead.
can't solve it. We can't solve it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there a
Mhm.
lot of Israelis will roll their eyes at this play and say, "What do you know? You're an American." I mean, they will. I've heard that before. In my defense, Israelis have been involved in the creation of the play. Certainly, the teenagers I worked with at Seeds of Peace, and they stood behind it, as did the Palestinian teams. But that's a valid criticism. On the other hand, if we don't speak out, who will?
Lauren, what difference do you want to see? What differences?
What change?
What change?
Well, I mean, I want to see peace. I want to see, the end of the occupation. I want to, how we get there is a hard part. I mean, I think there are obviously political strategies to get there. One of the issues that has come up with the play is the issue of violence, right? Because I mentioned Fatih, he organizes a suicide bombing, and one of my friends who's an activist, she's not Jewish or Arab, but she came to the play and she said, you need to show that violence is sometimes the only solution. And I have a little bit of a hard time with that because I don't really think violence is ever a solution. I can understand why people are pushed to it. I think there are better strategies that are more effective and more likely to lead to peace. I think social media is a really powerful one. I have a friend in Gaza, a really good Facebook friend. He's now doing, his name is Allah Soccer, and he runs a group called Palestine Charity Team, and they provide humanitarian assistance to families in Gaza. He's now going to grad school in Egypt. Lovely young man. And he uses social media very effectively to recount what's going on there and spread the word. So I think that's a tool that people can use. I think, obviously, I don't want to go into BDS because I know it's so controversial, but that is a tool. There are lots of ways. I think ultimately America's politicians will need to put pressure on Israel, and Americans can help that happen. But it also has to come within Israel. There probably needs to be a government change there. And so, it's a combination of the carrot and the stick, or the olive branch. I mean, Yasser Arafat had a famous line, right? I come bearing the olive branch in one hand and the gun in the other. Don't let me drop the olive branch. I hope that this can be achieved with the olive branch. There was should I tell the story about the tile maker?
I do. This was, again, yours usually ahead of me. That's amazing.
Because it's how we get to peace. So when I was in Jerusalem, this was in 1991, I spent a wonderful day traveling through the four quarters of the old city with my tour group and my friends. And we came to a little a tile maker store in the Armenian Quarter. And was chatting with the man, and he was showing us the different designs, and he showed us how he had taken the four corner pieces from another tile and put them together to create a new design. And he was very proud of that. And we started talking about the conflict. We were asking him, well, do you like it better? Did you like it better under Jordan or under Israel? And he had opinions on that. He said that being under Jordan was actually better for his pocketbook because the Israeli government tended to promote Jewish tourism over non-Jewish tourism. But he liked the freedoms under Israel. So he kind of liked both. He said, if I had my druthers, I'd go back. I care more about my pocketbook. So he said he'd go back to Jordan. But then we asked his opinion about the conflict. And he said, well, here's the problem. He said, our leaders, they're not creative enough. If they really wanted a solution, they could, but they're overlooking the corner pieces. And so, he likened it to the tile. If you could take the corner pieces and put them together in a new way, a creative way, you could find a solution. And I just thought there was a lot of wisdom in that. I think what that solution will look like is we haven't found it yet because we haven't looked at the corner pieces. It's probably not purely a two-state solution or purely a one-state solution. It's probably some very creative federation that preserves the rights of Jewish people, Muslim people, and Christian people. It can be done, right? Canada does it with Quebec, yes. Right?
Does the play address any solution? Or
yeah. Shall I read the eulogy?
Yes.
Okay. So at the very end of the play, I am giving away more than I should, but that's okay. You still have to come see it.
Yes, I mean the song that I just played. Can you ever, resist against not going and seeing the play? You
Yeah,
have to.
our performers will be amazing,
Yeah,
and the music is really powerful, and the director John Vrigi has just a brilliant vision. But so anyway, this is at the very end, or towards the very end, Ismail, the 10 days of from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur have run their course, and we hear the shofar and the Avinu Malkeinu, which is the Jewish song that signals the onset of Yom Kippur. And Ismail has left Yitzhak. His ghost has finally been admitted to heaven because they've reconciled, and so now Yitzhak is left over Ismail's body with his identity card. And he has the realization, because he hears the Avinu Malkeinu, and he says, it's Yom Kippur. On Rosh Hashanah, fate is written, but not sealed until 10 days later on Yom Kippur. And in those 10 days, you can make changes. And he picks up the identity card and he starts to read it. Ismail Mansour, Dear El Bala Camp. No, not like that. Ismail Mansour, from the land of orange groves and olive trees, the shiny blue sea and the sweet waters of the river Jordan, from the land of ancient temples and stone walls, the muezzin's call to prayer, a minyan chanting, church bells, wedding bells, and the sounds of children laughing. Not Gaza, not Palestine, not even Israel, but the country we all share, Abraham's land. And with that, he throws away the identity card.
absolutely gorgeous. Excellent. So it was, I truly enjoyed the conversation, Lauren. Thank you very much.
Me too.
Yes, it's amazing. I truly recommend for to September, between September 17 to September 27, the play is going to be up in Broadway. But if you want to hear more about what the Broadway means here for this dialogue, you need to go back and listen to Lauren. Of going back and listening and revisiting the whole premises of what we talked about, please. I'm gonna post the same video on YouTube. Peace Talk with Sara, and then I will edit the audio and post it on Apple Podcast and Google Podcast. So it is available there to listen in your leisure. Also, what else can I tell you? Oh, and then this is the first program of the series that we are presenting. If you have questions for my future guests, some of the names are up on the site goldtune.com, and some of them are coming up. But the way to to send me your questions is you need to go to goldtune.com, sign up for the newsletter, and you'll receive we send you a confirmation email. In the confirmation email, you reply to the same confirmation email, but in the subject line, put down the name of the guest, and then in the body of the email, just write down your question. And if you would like to give us a little bit about yourself, of perhaps who you are, your age, and just a few things that you would like us to share in the program, so then we'll read your question in the program. And for the sake of this program, the information is available on the internet, abrahamslandmusical.com. You can also send email of any questions you have from Lauren, and then we encourage you to go to the website to find out how you can help out with putting together putting together the help out with the funding, perhaps what I'm trying to say. So with right now, thanks so much for watching and listening to what we have to say. My dear guest, Lauren Marshall, and then my assistant producer, Amy, were with me. We're going to be back on Thursday to a next discussion. But before I go, I basically had Lauren to share a few, if she wanted to share a statement or a thought or ideas about. I mean, we learned a lot throughout the program, but if she wants to share anything about peace or what. Yeah, so I just wanted to have you let you have the closing.
Oh, thank you. Wow. Boy, I'm trying to think what else there is to say. We've had so much time. You know, I guess right now here we are in Seattle, and we're, you know, kind of experiencing a sort of lockdown where suddenly our spheres are very much limited. And I think a lot about my Facebook friend, Ala. Just a few months ago, he dreamed of coming to the United States to go to graduate school. And he was very excited by it. And a mutual friend of ours had helped him get a slot at University of San Diego in an English program. He was going to come there for a year, do the English program, and then go into graduate school in business. And he got he applied for a visa, and he got an appointment last August to go to the embassy, the U.S. embassy, which of course is now in Jerusalem, for his visa appointment. He was so excited that he was going to finally get out of Gaza, where he had pretty much spent his whole life, although he wasn't born there. It was interesting. He was born in Saudi Arabia because he's Palestinian, but his family was living in Saudi Arabia. And after the Oslo Accords and Israel pulled out of Gaza, and people thought that Gaza would become a sovereign nation and there would be peace, their family came to Gaza. He was, I think, about 7 years old at the time. And they were all excited to build this new country. And of course, it didn't turn out anything like that. You know, before they knew it, there was the blockade and the suffering. And now they're locked in and they can't get out. And there's shortages of food and electricity. And so this was going to be his first chance, really, since he was 7 years old, to leave Gaza and to travel. And he was so excited to go to visit Jerusalem, to come to the United States. My daughter was in college in LA, and I was like, I'll come down and we'll meet up, you know, in California, and we'll visit. And I was so naive. I remember when the day he went to the embassy, I said, oh, go travel, get to see Jerusalem, you know. And he was videotaping from the window of his bus on the way. So then I didn't hear from him for about 24 hours. I was really worried. And I finally found out what happened is they got to the embassy. There were 40 of them, young students. They all hoping for U.S. visas. They waited for hours and hours. They had to give up their watches and their cell phones and everything. They finally got to go in, and they each got about 40 seconds and, you know, to say why they wanted their visa, and then they were handed their rejection letter. And out of the 40 of them, only 2 of them were given visas. And so there was his dream crushed. And of course, he didn't get to visit Jerusalem. He saw the Dome of the Rock, you know, far off in the distance. And he was basically like a prison bus, and he was sent back to Gaza. Mm-hmm. And he was so sad. And I was so sad for him to see that dream crushed. And I am happy that he was able to get to Egypt, and where he's doing graduate school now. But now that I know what it's like personally to not have freedom, to not be able to leave, you know, your country, your city, your state, to not be able to achieve your dreams, to really to not know what the next day is going to bring. You know, I feel in a very visceral sense what it's like to live under occupation. And my heart really goes out to the Palestinians and to the Israelis who are suffering from having created a situation that they don't quite know how to back out of peacefully, and yet are living with increasing fear and racism and hatred, and that's just no way to live. And I just want to see it lead to a happier future for them. Maybe
we could see a happier future. Who knows? I mean, I don't know. I never lose hope.
Yeah, I think of like someone like Allah, who's just such a happy young man who's really devoted his life to helping children. And you know, his what Palestine Charity Team does is they try to help children live ordinary lives, you know, to have field trips to parks and bring in clowns for birthdays, and they help children who, you know, are in wheelchairs and need medical assistance, and you know, who are living in such difficult conditions to have a childhood. And you know, I see somebody with that kind of love and happiness for the world, a young person, and I want to see them realize their dreams.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. On Thursday, Ramadan is starting for the holy month.
Yes.
And then it is probably one of those times that I truly understand and never try myself. I mean, this is never try to blame anything on anything, because especially when because I can experience hunger, and then when I experience hunger, I can sympathize with people who do not have enough or do not have. In that sense, it's for me, it's very powerful sympathy, and the way that, I mean, exactly the you were mentioning. I mean, being experiencing the kind of I mean, this is nothing like what people are experiencing back in Gaza, but experiencing the kind of experience, you know, okay, so what's like to not being able to be out or having the freedom and so forth and so on. At least the sympathy that we may experience within this area may draw some means and some peace and compassion towards our own lives, hopefully.
I hope so. I mean, we just had Passover about a week ago, and of course, in Passover, you know that we say, like, you know, we're not free until, as long as slavery exists anywhere in the world, we're not truly free. And I take that to heart. Right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lauren. You were watching me, Lauren, talking absolutely about Abraham's Land and about this interesting play. It's going to be up on Broadway.
Broadway Performance Hall.
Broadway Performance Hall. Thank you so much. Yes, between September 17 and 27, you need to go and see and watch the play with Amy here with me. Thank you so much for watching us.
Thank you, Amy.
Khuda Hafiz.